Most people think debt collection only exists because people are bad with money, but that's not entirely true, and believing it is quietly costing them. Debt collection exists because without it, lending as we know it would collapse. And once you understand that, the entire conversation then changes from fear to facts. But nobody explains this, but that's what this video is for. Think about the last time you used a credit card, took out a loan, or bought something on a payment plan. That transaction existed because a lender calculated that enough people would repay to make the risk worthwhile. But what happens when they don't? When repayments stop and nobody follows up, losses only build up. And those losses don't disappear. They get recovered somewhere else through things like higher interest rates, tighter lending criteria, reduced access to credit for people who've done nothing wrong. Debt collection is the mechanism that prevents that from happening at scale. And yet most people picture it as something to fear rather than something to understand. That misunderstanding is exactly what this video wants to clarify. If you are new here, welcome. I'm Novah or Oula. I've spent over 15 years inside the banking industry as a credit risk professional, from designing consumer lending policies to managing loan portfolios and to building debt collection and recovery strategies that sit behind the products some of us use every day. On this channel, I post videos about personal debt and lending topics through a risk lens, the side of the system most borrowers never see but are always affected by. If that sounds interesting to you, do not forget to click the subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you don't miss on my new videos whenever I post. Everything I share here is for financial education and is not meant for personal financial advice. My goal is simply to help you understand how the credit system works so you can navigate it with more confidence. A friend once told me that she pictured debt collectors as these men in black suits chasing people down the street. That image never left me because it's almost exactly how most people still think about this, even inside a heavily regulated industry. In this video, I'm going to walk through 5 myths about debt collection that most people still believe, including the one I would argue is the most financially dangerous assumption you can make. We'll go to the myths, but first, let's further understand why the system exists. Let me show you why debt collection matters using the simplest possible illustration. I'll have 2 scenarios here, assuming it's the same lender, same loan book, just one key difference. And I'll just use some rounded numbers purely to make the logic clear. These aren't real numbers, it's just a framework for illustration. When a lender provides credit, they generate income through the interest and fees they charge. Let's call that income they generate 100. From that 100, 3 costs come straight off the top. First is the cost of funds. The money lenders lend out to customers come from somewhere. It can come from deposits the lenders have received. They can go to the wholesale market. There's borrowed capital. That's a cost. They have to pay for that. Secondly, there is the operating cost. Lenders have people, their systems, there's technology, there's compliance that runs the entire lending operation from application through to repayment until the loan ends. And the third line of costs are the bad debt losses, loans that default, accounts that go unpaid or are high risk. Regulators require lenders to account for these. And so here are the 2 scenarios. In the first scenario, where we are seeing bad debts are actively managed, the losses are real, but they are controlled. If we look at revenue minus costs, still leaves a viable margin. The business works and lending continues. If you look at the second scenario, which I call scenario B, we can say on this scenario, bad debts are not managed. Same revenue, same cost of funds, same operating costs, but the bad debt line is materially higher and uncontrolled. That margin then disappears. And at a certain point, it becomes a loss. And here's what that means for you as a borrower. A lender running scenario B has two realistic options to restore profitability. Either they have to raise interest rates or tighten who they are willing to lend to. And neither of those outcomes is good for customers. So debt collection done properly is what keeps lenders in scenario A. And scenario A is what keeps credit accessible and affordable. And that's the case for debt collection. It's not about fear. It's not about punishment. It's a simple financial logic. I'm sure by now you'd be wondering what actually happens in debt collection. So when an account becomes overdue, collection almost always begins with something far less dramatic than people imagine. There will be a simple text message, an email, a reminder notice that will go out to customer. And the goal at that point is straightforward, just to bring the account back to a position of financial health as early as possible. For the lender, early resolution is always the preferred outcome. It's cheaper, it's faster, and better for the relationship. And for the customer, early resolution means fewer consequences down the line. And engagement with customers operate inside a strict regulatory framework. Debt collection guidelines govern when contact can occur, how often, through which channels, what language is and isn't acceptable, and what behaviors are prohibited entirely. There's no harassment, no intimidation, no unreasonable contact frequency. The black suit chasing doesn't exist in modern regulated lending. What does exist is a structured, documented process, one that you have the right to understand and navigate. And so now let's talk about the 5 myths I mentioned earlier. I've ordered these deliberately. We are building towards the most important one. The first myth is that debt collectors and credit bureaus are the same thing. They are not. A debt collector contacts you about repayment. A credit bureau maintains an independent record of your credit history. These are entirely separate entities operating under different rules. A collector may report information to a bureau, but they do not control your credit file, and your credit file does not belong to them. This distinction matters enormously when you are trying to understand what's on your record, dispute incorrect information, or rebuild your credit position. The starting point is always your credit file, not the collector. The second myth is that debt collectors can contact you anytime they want. That's not under regulated guidelines. Contact hours are defined. Contact frequency is limited. If you've advised them of the best time to contact you, they do listen. But please just ensure that you are available when they reach out. Or if you've missed their call back. If you've requested written communication, they also listen. The protection exists. Most people simply don't know they do until they need it. The third myth is that you have no rights once a debt is in collection. This is almost the opposite of the truth. While the lender has a right to engage you regarding the debt, your rights don't disappear because someone calls you about money. They remain with you through every stage of the process. You have the right to request written verification of the debt. You can raise a hardship request if you are experiencing financial difficulty, and this will be reviewed on case-by-case basis, and lender makes decision to approve or not. You can escalate to the relevant complaints authority if any of the processes feels unfair. And the fourth myth is that just by talking about an old debt automatically restarts the limitation period. What I'll say is this: if you have an older debt and you're unsure of where you stand, don't let fear push you into action without information. Get independent advice. The fifth myth I want to talk about, and this is the one I want you to remember, is that if I ignore it, it goes away. It doesn't. Debt does not expire through silence. Limitation periods apply to legal action, but ignoring contact does not reset any clock, does not protect your credit file, does not reduce the balance you owe. In almost every case, ignoring the problem narrows your options and extends the damage. The people who engage early, even in genuinely difficult circumstances, almost always end up in a better position than those who avoid the conversation until there are few choices left. Avoidance feels like protection, but it isn't. And as I conclude, I just want to say that debt collection is not an enemy. It's a structural part of a credit system that allows lending to exist fairly and sustainably, one that most of us rely on at some point in our lives. Fear grows in the absence of information. And today, we've just replaced quite a bit of it. How the system works, what your rights are, and the 5 myths that, if you believe them, can quietly make your situation worse. If this was useful, share it with someone who would benefit. And subscribe, because this is exactly the kind of thing most people don't encounter until they need it. And by then, they wish they had known it sooner.